In an ancient castle, a man stood silently nearby. Upon seeing him, a vampire commanded the others to kill him. While they rejected their king for reducing to mere humanity, he stood motionless, but his crimson eyes gazed at them. He then used his dripping blood and summoned his sword. With determined eyes, he raises it high into the air. Following that, he casts a thunderous spell upon the vampires below. After it, he asked if they really thought sheer numbers could overcome Vlad, who was the vampire king. He then called them foolish old-world vampires as their lifeless bodies piled upon the ground. Vlad also added they ignored his warnings, and that coexistence between humans and vampires is good. With that, he asked once again if they were truly unable to understand that. However, his eyes grew cold when he sensed something amiss. He then quickly called out the name Adam behind him, but his expression turned into shock instead. As Adam stabbed Vlad, he asked if Vlad was the one who failed to understand. Nevertheless, he quietly bid him farewell, so Vlad's expression darkened more. Ignoring this, Adam raised his sword to end the reign of the great vampire king. With a wide smile on his face, Adam looked at him and said that they would meet again. Hearing this, Vlad's expression turned to horror, but it was already too late because Adam's sword had pierced through him. After the vampire king Vlad, who sought peace with humans, died, the world came under vampire rule, and darkness shrouded the land. Without their king's command, vampires hunted humans for food and forced them into hiding. Still, they refused to surrender and kept fighting through a resistance group to win back their freedom. In the present, a young man named Hero was nearly struck by a vampire's sword, but his comrade managed to block the attack just in time. The man immediately scolded Hero for slowing them down, prompting Hero to apologize quickly. Still, his comrade shouted that their fallen allies had died protecting Hero. Hero then insisted that he wanted to fight alongside everyone, but the man harshly called him a burden, who only endangered the group. At the same time, the man struggled to defend himself against his opponent. As a result, his weapon was knocked away, and the vampire's sword was aimed directly at him. At that moment, a girl nearby finished off the surrounding vampires and rushed toward him. With a swift motion, the girl struck the vampire's neck and cleanly beheaded him. When Hero saw her face, he was stunned, but the girl named Maria had already finished the fight with calm precision. Witnessing this, the man beside Hero stared in disbelief. He then tried to call out to Maria, who was their captain. However, Maria ignored him and went straight to Hero, who quickly assured her that he was fine and thanked her for saving him. Meanwhile, the others fell silent for a moment. They then whispered about Maria's victory since they struggled with even one vampire and questioned her power. Hearing this, the man noted Maria wasn't from their region and asked why she chose to join the resistance. But before he could say more, a sword was suddenly pointed at him. Upon looking, he found that it was Maria's doing. Shen then silenced him with a cold glare and told him to refrain from chatting on the battlefield. She reminded him that those who waste time gossiping in moments like this are often the first to die. The man then immediately apologized, while Hero silently admired Maria's strength and composure. But suddenly, Maria turned her gaze to him. When she called him as an unofficial member of the 7th Division, he quickly replied to her affirmatively. She then told him to stay back and support, but he insisted on fighting to protect everyone. Hearing this, she was momentarily taken aback. She then gently tapped his chest and told him not to forget that the desire to protect others is the greatest source of strength. With that, she assured him that he could become stronger. She also encouraged him to do his best with a faint smile. Blushing, Hero responded with a determined yes. Later, they continued their journey together. Along the way, Hero thought about how much he admired Captain Maria and how he wanted to become as strong as her. Furthermore, he also dreamed of reclaiming the world from the vampires and restoring light to humanity. As he clenched his fist, he silently vowed to make that dream a reality. However, that hope was soon shattered, and he froze in horror. After all, he found the ground littered with the corpses of his comrades. Among them lay Maria's lifeless body. Shock and disbelief filled him. In addition to his surprise, he spotted a vampire holding the severed head of one of his comrades. After realizing that the one before him was a special class vampire, Hero was left terrified. The vampire named Frist then scolded his subordinate Daniel and said it was shameful to struggle against weak humans. In response, Daniel apologized nervously, but Frist ignored him and turned his attention to Hero's remaining comrade. Desperate, Hero reached for a sword lying nearby. However, Frist noticed him and remarked that there was still one survivor. Hero then looked back at him in fear, but Frist simply waved a hand and mockingly apologized. Then, he summoned his sword before Hero. After it, he swung it toward Hero and told him coldly to join his fallen friends. But before the strike could reach Hero, Maria suddenly appeared. Using her sword, she blocked Frist's sword. Seeing her, Hero cried out her name in shock, but Frist's eyes narrowed as he recognized her face and remarked that she was one of the hunters. With a forceful swing, he knocked her sword aside and said it made sense. Daniel had trouble fighting. He then grabbed Maria's hair and said it was clear she'd hit her limit. He also mocked her for trying to protect others despite barely standing. But Maria smirked and said a heartless monster could never grasp human beauty. Due to her words, Frist's eyes narrowed in fury. Without hesitation, he slammed her hard into the ground. Declaring that he had lost interest in her, he ordered the other vampires to do whatever they wanted with her. The vampires then captured Maria and prepared to execute her. Seeing this, Hero desperately called out her name but found that his legs refused to move. As one vampire raised his sword, Hero could only watch in horror and scream her name as Maria's arm was severed. Maria's eyes then widened in terror. Soon, she let out a piercing cry of pain that scared Hero. Nevertheless, the vampires successfully sever her arm. One of them then turned towards Hero's direction. With Maria's severed arm, he proceeds to approach Hero. Furthermore, he urged him to drink it. Horrified, Hero trembled as the warm blood dripped down his face. But the vampire just smiled and told him that he would let both of them live if Hero agreed to become like them by drinking human blood. As the blood continued to flow, Hero thought to himself that it was all because he was weak, that if only he had been stronger, he could have protected the others. So all he could do now was accept what was happening. Yet even after a while, the vampire noticed nothing changed within him. So the vampire sighed in disappointment. He then muttered that Hero lacked conviction, which is something he despised most about humans. So as he raised his sword, he said that their weakness made him sick to his stomach. After it, he struck Hero with full force. As pain coursed through him, Hero realized how utterly pathetic he was. He then looked at Maria, who had risked everything, yet he'd done nothing. His vision blurred as he thought that if only he was stronger, Maria might still be alive. But even at the end, Maria, who believed in him, was the one who suffered most. As those thoughts filled his fading mind, Hero lost consciousness. However, his heart began to beat violently. In that moment, a figure emerged before him, and it was Vlad. Vlad then asked if he wished to become stronger, and if he truly wanted to protect those precious to him. Extending his hand toward Hero, he told him that if there was something he must protect, he should reach out to him. With that, Vlad's power began to envelop Hero's body. Soon after, the vampires were startled as the ground began to tremble violently. Just like them, Maria looked around in confusion. When she glanced upward, she saw Hero forcefully push down the vampire standing before him. He then muttered that his body did not seem to be a bad vessel. Hearing this, the surrounding vampires quickly questioned him, but Hero proceeded to raise his hand. Following it, he manifested a sword out of thin air. The vampires then gasped in shock that he was still alive. One of them lifted his weapon and shouted that they should have made sure Hero was dead. But before he could strike, Hero unleashed a bolt of lightning that instantly hit him and several others. The remaining vampires then froze in terror. Lowering his sword, Hero ordered them to bow down. Then he declared that their king had returned. However, one vampire called it nonsense, so Hero struck him down at once and rebuked him for forgetting loyalty and respect after all this time. With that, he raised his sword once again and rushed toward another vampire. As his blade pierced through his opponent, Hero demanded to know if they had already forgotten their master. After driving his sword through the vampire's head, he leapt into the air and unleashed a powerful strike that hit the surrounding vampires. But Hero just looks at them coldly. With a wide swing, he released another devastating attack that struck through an entire group. As a result, their heads were sliced, and when Hero finally came down, the remaining vampires began to flee. Among them, Daniel shouted for the others to escape, but Hero's voice echoed through the air as he declared that betrayal must be punished. Nevertheless, Daniel turned to run while wondering how Vlad could still be alive when he had perished long ago. Suddenly, his name was called. As Hero approached him, he asked if Daniel had been doing well all this time. Shocked, Daniel spun around and demanded to know how he was there, but his eyes widened when he saw Hero's expression. With a darkened expression, Hero muttered that Daniel still remembered him. Without hesitation, he drove his sword through Daniel's forehead. While on it, he told him to deliver a message to the others in the afterlife, that Lord Vlad had returned. Retrieving his sword, he proceeded to stomp on Daniel's body. However, he suddenly stood motionless after it. Seeing this, Maria called out Hero's name. Slowly, he turned toward her and began walking closer. He then looked at her with his tired eyes and softly called her Captain. However, he suddenly collapsed. Seeing him on the ground, Maria shouted his name in shock, but even though she repeatedly called him, Hero remained unresponsive. Meanwhile, inside Hero's mind, he slowly opened his eyes and wondered if he was dead. However, what greeted him was Vlad calling his name. Upon seeing him, he was surprised to see a vampire. Vlad confirmed it and declared that he was the king of vampires. With that, he welcomed Hero to the afterlife. Hearing this, Hero quickly asked why the ruler of vampires was in the afterlife and how long this nightmare would continue. Vlad replied that they were inside Hero's dying consciousness. Furthermore, he revealed that he was already dead as well. He then said that the very vampires who once called him brother had killed him 500 years ago. Upon hearing this, Hiro realized it was when vampires took over the surface world, and Vlad confirmed it. He also said the vampires rejected peace with humans, so they killed him, and his soul, drifting for centuries, was consumed by revenge. This continued until a human who drank human blood appeared. Vlad also explained that when Hiro drank Maria's blood, their souls resonated. Due to this, he was allowed to be revived within Hiro. Setting that aside, Vlad told him he'd taken care of the earlier vampires for now, but then he showed Hiro a screen and warned the power wouldn't last if things stayed as they were. Hearing this, Hiro was stunned. Vlad then said Hiro had a body but no power, while he had power and a soul but no body for revenge. With that, he offered his hand to Hiro and asked if they should join forces. He also assured him that he could resurrect him. In response, Hiro asked if he was truly meant to ally with a vampire he loathed, but Vlad said hatred dies with the dead. He then asks Hiro whether he chooses to die with nothing done or live and gain power. Hearing this, Hiro suddenly thought of his family. He also remembered Maria losing her arm and how he might be able to protect them if he became strong. Thinking of this, he clenched his fist. Vlad then encouraged him to come forward. So Hiro finally reached for his hand and agreed to bring judgment upon their enemies, even if it meant becoming a devil. Not long after, Hiro woke up. However, he was surprised to see Maria in front of him. When he called her name, Maria looked at him. Seeing him finally awake, she pointed out that he had been unconscious, so he quickly apologized. But to his surprise, Maria also apologized to him. With that, his gaze turned toward the side. There, he saw the town almost reduced to ashes by the fire. Shocked by the sight, he quickly stood up. Maria then tells him that their previous battle with the vampires had only been a decoy to burn the town. When the vampires discovered their hideout, they took advantage of their absence and attacked. As a result, only she and Hiro remained both on the battlefield and in the town. Still, Hiro rushed toward the burning area while Maria could only call out his name, but his expression soon turned to horror. After all, he found the lifeless bodies of his parents on the ground. Overwhelmed with grief, he fell to his knees and questioned why this had happened. At that moment, his loud cry echoed through the surroundings, but the sound drew a vampire to him and was surprised to discover humans had survived. He then tried to attack Hiro, but Maria intercepted him. While on it, she urged Hiro to escape. However, a horde of vampires appeared and surrounded them. Hiro then looked at Maria's back and called her name in distress. Suddenly, the vampire pushed Maria forward. While she was still surprised, she was struck in the face. So frustration filled her as she realized how disadvantaged she was after losing an arm. Seeing her condition, Hiro called out to her worriedly. In that instant, he realized he needed to fight as well. Remembering Vlad and the strength he had gained, he gripped his sword tightly. He then tried to charge at the vampire. However, the vampire easily kicked him away. As he staggered back, he couldn't help but be in pain. Seeing this, Maria called out to him in concern, while the vampire just called him a disgusting creature. Deciding that Hiro was in the way, the vampire decided to kill him first, but his neck was suddenly sliced. Due to this, his head disappeared in an instant. Witnessing this, both Maria and Hiro were stunned. Moments later, Maria recognized the figures nearby and shouted that they were members of the anti-vampire unit, which is known as the Hunter Guild. One of the hunters noticed the state of the town and realized they had arrived too late, but he assured Maria and Hiro to leave the rest to them. Hiro was then astonished to learn that vampire hunters truly existed. Since while the resistance fought with guerrilla tactics as pawns, a separate elite force called vampire hunters faced vampires head-on. Now in the present, the hunters faced the advancing horde of vampires. In disbelief, the 7th Squad's Vice Captain Todo remarked that it was a thoroughly unpleasant situation. The B-class hunter Sato also responded that it was nothing new, while another B-class hunter named Yuki added that vampires were not worth keeping alive. With that, the hunters prepared for battle. Immediately, a group of vampires charged straight toward Todo. In response, Todo drew his sword that was filled with electricity. Once his weapon was ready, he unleashed a powerful strike toward the approaching vampires. However, he quickly realized that a few had managed to evade his attack, so he chased after them. At the same time, Sato skillfully maneuvered through the battlefield and swiftly eliminated several vampires. Afterward, he reminded Todo to perform his attacks properly, to which Todo insisted that he was. But their talk was cut short when Yuki snapped at the vampires for getting blood on her uniform. As she hit them, she grumbled that her new uniform was already stained with blood. Calling the vampires lowlifes, she swung her flail at them with precision. Afterward, the battle raged on as vampire hunters fought fiercely while Hiro and Maria watched. Eventually, the vampires retreated and were wary of the combined strength of B and A-class hunters. Seeing this, Hiro could not help but remark that the hunters were truly overwhelming. As the battle cleared, Yuki looked at Hiro and Maria to ask if they were okay. But she was shocked when she noticed Maria's missing arm. She then urgently stated that it needed to be treated. However, her surprise deepened as she recognized Maria's identity. Hearing her exclaim, Todo and Sato also turned to look and were astonished to realize that Maria was there. Confused, Hiro asked what they meant by that. Todo then explained that Maria had once been an exceptional hunter, which left Hiro stunned. While Yuki tended to Maria's arm, Todo continued saying that Maria was believed to have gone missing and died long ago. But Maria responded that it was a long time ago and admitted that she could no longer protect anything. Hearing this, Hiro felt a deep worry for her. But suddenly, their conversation was cut short when Sato was knocked to the ground. The others looked on in confusion as Sato admitted that he had let his guard down. However, he was suddenly stomped on the chest. At that moment, Frist appeared and talked about how the maggots had grown too rampant to ignore. Immediately, Todo readied his sword, while Yuki's expression tensed. Seeing the large number of vampires, she muttered that it was unfair, and with their captain absent, she asked what to do, so Sato said they had no choice but to fight. With that, the hunters once again faced the enemy head-on. Watching them, Hiro was filled with fear. He thought that he too should have become strong by now. Remembering Vlad's words, he tried to reach for his sword and believed he could fight, but his body refused to move. Seeing this, Maria warned him it was reckless to fight like this, but he found it hard to accept. Desperation then filled him as he wondered what he should do. Suddenly, Vlad reminds him of his desire for power. However, Vlad told him that he first needed to fulfill a condition. Hiro immediately asked what it was. Realizing he had forgotten to mention it earlier, Vlad decided to explain. As he whispered the condition into Hiro's mind, Hiro's expression turned to surprise, for Vlad had told him that he must drink Maria's blood once again. Meanwhile, Todo continued clashing with Frist. At one point, Frist taunted him by asking if that was all he could do, which caused Todo to sweat as he struggled to keep up. Suddenly, Frist unleashed a heavy strike, so Todo staggered backward while gripping his sword tightly. Seeing this, Yuki told Sato that Todo was being pushed back, but Sato said they'd fought too long and Todo's zeal was spent. He also added there were too many vampires, so they had to break through the weaker ones first. However, Yuki was suddenly struck across the face. As she continued to fight, she questioned his order to break through. After all, she was barely managing to stay alive. Meanwhile, Hiro clashes with Vlad in his thoughts and vows never to drink human blood again. Seeing Hiro's resistance, Vlad told him he didn't need to kill but just use it briefly to regain power. Still, Hiro insisted humans don't drink blood, so Vlad can only say that it couldn't be helped then. He then declared he'd handle the negotiations himself, which bewildered Hiro. Before Hiro could stop him, his body began moving on its own and this startled Maria. As Maria tried to comfort him, Hiro suddenly lunged toward her. With Vlad now controlling his body, he urged her to let him drink her blood. Hearing this, Maria was stunned, but Hiro was even more shocked. Ignoring this, Vlad uses his body to explain that he needed her blood to regain his strength like before. But Maria was still left speechless by his words. Regardless, Vlad continued telling her to stay still. Seeing this, Hiro desperately tried to stop him. Just as Vlad reached out to Maria, Hiro's willpower surged. He tried to pull his body, and finally grabbed Vlad's hand. With this, he managed to bring back Vlad to him. Surprised by this, Vlad remarked on Hiro's remarkable willpower, but Hiro gripped his hand tightly and declared he wanted to grow stronger to protect humans, so he would never lend his body for anything that would harm them. Hearing that, Vlad stared at him silently, while Hiro firmly held him. He then admitted he didn't fully understand, but human will fascinate him. Raising his hand, he mused that it might make for an interesting show, and challenged Hiro to impress him. At last, Hiro regained full control of his body and called out to Maria. He proceeds to apologize for his rough behavior, but Maria continued looking at him in bewilderment. Unexpectedly, she agreed to give him her blood. Hearing this, he asked her why. She then explained that if it restored his former strength, he might just save everyone from the crisis. Without hesitation, she unwrapped the bandage, but Hiro stopped her since the wound had only just closed. However, she had already reopened the wound, and the sight of her blood made Hiro tremble in fear. Yet Maria proceeds to catch the dripping blood in her hand. After it, she proceeds to press it into Hiro's mouth and urges him to fight. Though hesitant at first, Hiro finally opened his mouth and drank her blood. Soon, his vision blurred. Following it, an immense surge of power erupted from within him. Due to this, Frist, who was fighting, turned toward Hiro's direction. Sensing the overwhelming energy, Sato's attention was drawn to it as well, and he quickly alerted Todo. Soon, both Frist and Todo froze by the sudden change in the air. As the tension thickened, everyone turned to face Hiro. Upon looking up, they saw Hiro charging forward with his sword. At the same time, He looked at the vampires in his way and quickly sliced them all down. Despite this, his expression remained calm. Witnessing Hiro's actions, the others began to wonder what was happening. Among them, Todo questioned what Hiro had just shown. Meanwhile, Hiro felt so light he barely registered the cut, and his unreal strength proved this was Vlad's power. However, his thoughts were interrupted when someone approached him. Looking up, he saw Frist watching him cautiously. Without hesitation, he asked why Hiro had that sword, but Hiro just looked at him and coldly declared that he would kill him. However, just the sound of Hiro's voice made Frist's body freeze in fear. Still, he managed to block Hiro's attack. While on it, he quickly felt overwhelmed by the sheer impact. Realizing the danger, he ordered his men to attack all at once, but seeing them getting cut down, Frist realized retreat was their only option. But before he could act, the vampires shielding him died. Hiro then called out his name and told him to draw his sword, so that he could kill him here. Hearing this, Frist demanded to know how Hiro knew his name. Moreover, he wondered why a human like him smelled like Vlad. As he lunged at Hiro, he declared that Vlad should already be dead, but Hiro met his attack with a calm, cold stare. Due to this, Frist's nerves tremble. Without realizing it, his face was suddenly sliced, so he was forced to stagger back and curse in pain. Before he could recover, Hiro appeared in front of him. Using his sword, he thrust it toward Frist's chest. At that moment, Frist realized that a direct confrontation was too dangerous, so he quickly leaped into the air. From above, he laughed mockingly at Hiro. He even claimed that Hiro was powerless since he could not fly even if he could fight. With that, he pulled the sword from his chest and said the power was too much for a human. Just as he prepared to retreat, a blade suddenly pierced through his mouth. As he struggled to speak, Hiro looked at him coldly. After it, Hiro asked who said he only had one weapon. Moments later, he used an explosive spell to finish him off. Frist's blood then splattered across Hiro's face. Following it, his burning body fell to the ground. Hiro then turned away and coldly watched the flames consume the corpse. As he summoned his sword again, he recalled how Vlad felled a powerful vampire with one overwhelming strike. So he gripped the sword tightly and thought about how this was the power of the Vampire King, and that with it, he could protect everyone. Suddenly, someone called out to him, so he turned and asked if they were all alright, but the others stood back cautiously. Sato then immediately questioned the source of his power, but Hiro looked at them in confusion. Seeing this, Todo and Yuki readied their weapons, and Maria watched him nervously. Finally, Sato spoke again and said that it almost seemed like Hiro was a vampire. Immediately, Hiro tried to explain, but he was ordered to stay back. They then accused him of being a possible spy for the vampires and quickly prepared to attack. Hearing this, Hiro knew it was bad since if they found out he was using Vlad's power, they'd kill him anyway. Suddenly, Sato pointed out that Hiro might be the one who killed the resistance members. Hiro then tried to explain, but Sato asked Todo for permission to attack. However, Todo told her not to be hasty since Hiro was innocent until proven guilty. Even so, he raised his sword toward Hiro. He then declared that he could not ignore his power. Yuki also lifted her dagger at Maria, and they decided to take her with them. Meanwhile, inside a castle, a group of vampires discussed the death of Count Earl Frist. One of them dismissed it since the death of someone of that rank was meaningless. But another man warned him to show respect since Frist was more useful than him. Before he could finish, his head was suddenly sliced off. The perpetrator named Dice then mockingly apologized and said his hand had slipped. He also explained that he had done it because the man made a foolish remark. But the host told Dice to control his temper because such behavior was undignified. Suddenly, the beheaded vampire asked whether Dice was afraid of mere humans. But he also figured that with vampires like Dice in power, it was no wonder humans were killing them. Still, he thought it absurd that weak humans dared to rise against them. So he declared that they should be crushed by despair. Back with Todo's group, they continued on their way. Todo then ordered Hiro and Maria freed from restraints. He then apologized but explained the place was important and dangerous if outsiders found out. After that, Todo said their group was made up of vampire hunters with special powers, trained by a dedicated organization. He also explained that the resistance fighters received their orders from this same organization. Finally, he introduced the place to Hiro, which was the Hunter Guild. Upon seeing it, Hiro was shocked. However, a man suddenly appeared and commended Todo for his work. Upon looking, they saw it was Captain Jin, who apologized for missing the fight and asked about the casualties. Todo started explaining what had happened with Hiro. However, Jin's attention shifted when he noticed Maria, and his expression turned to surprise. Meanwhile, Todo explained that Hiro was a survivor from the resistance, but he seemed suspicious, so he kept him under watch. After understanding this, Jin introduced himself as captain of the 7th squad of the Vampire Hunter Guild. He also introduced his vice captain Todo, who was an A-class hunter. In addition, he said the ones who brought Hiro were from his squad, and that hunters were split into teams led by S-Class. After saying this, Jin approached Hiro. He then apologized that they could not save his squad, but Hiro told him that it was not his fault. However, Sato suddenly kicked him in the back. He said the past didn't matter, and it was time to measure Hiro and Maria. Afterwards, Maria was the first to stand on the platform. Not long after, she was enveloped in light. Witnessing this, Yuki couldn't help but say that it was expected from Maria. After all, they could clearly see an incredible amount of zeal flowing from her. After the device showed an A, Todo was impressed that Maria still ranked A-class despite losing an arm. But they all knew Maria had always stood out as a hunter, so the A-class zeal level was no surprise. However, they still wondered how things went so wrong even with Maria there. Hearing this, Maria tried to explain, but was interrupted by someone. Hiro then asked what zeal and A-class meant since the resistance had never heard of such terms. In response, Jin said hunters with aptitude gain powers and A-class above could unlock even greater abilities. He further explained, zeal is the energy for powers, and those with more can fight longer and harder. With that, Yuki added, Todo was pushed back, because he had used up most of his zeal. Jin then continued that zeal showed strength and S-class was for captains, which made Maria formidable as A-class. Still, Hiro felt conflicted because he had never once seen Maria use any special abilities. But Sato kicked him out of his daze and said it was his turn. With that, Hiro was forced to step onto the platform. Soon, the magic circle beneath him began to glow. At that moment, Sato called him a vampire and said he wanted to see what power Hiro was hiding. Moreover, he's eager to tear off his disguise. Not long after, Hiro was engulfed in immense light. Witnessing this, the others were taken aback. Meanwhile, Hiro looked down at his own hands in confusion. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain, as if something was restraining him. Watching this, the others turned to Jin for an explanation. Todo even wondered aloud if Hiro might possess an incredible amount of power. However, the magic circle suddenly stopped glowing. Confused by this, the others wondered why nothing appeared. Just like them, Hiro asked what it meant. Todo then explained that rank tests could fail if someone's power was too weak, which only confused Hiro more. Still, Sato said the powers looked vampiric earlier, and muttered they should kill Hiro if he was a spy. But Todo quickly told him to stop saying things like that. Meanwhile, Hiro clenched his fists and wondered why his power felt weak, despite gaining Vlad's strength. Noticing his expression, Jin told him to cheer up since surviving was proof of his strength. He also encouraged Hiro not to give up since some awakened their powers later. Hearing this, Hiro nodded quietly. Later in his room, Hiro kept replaying Jin's words urging him to live. Thinking it over, Hiro knew he had to stop brooding and remembered those he failed to protect like his family and comrades. Thus, he needed to live for them and continue protecting humanity. With that determination, the image of Vlad flashed in his mind. He thought that it didn't matter what happened to him as long as he could protect others. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a loud noise. An urgent call from the speaker ordered all squads to take position at once. Moreover, it added that there was an enemy attack happening outside. Afterwards, Todo's group began facing the vampires head-on. However, Sato began to suspect the vampires attacked now because they knew the base was undermanned. As he cut down the enemies, he shouted there had to be a traitor among them. But Todo stayed calm and told Sato and Yuki to hold the enemy where they were. He reminded them the 7th squad was in Blue District, so he'd head to unguarded Ash District to help. As Todo ran, he worried about the civilians in Red District and wondered where Jin had gone. Meanwhile, back in the room, Hiro tried the window but it wouldn't move. Frustrated, he shouted that he could fight and demanded to be let out. Suddenly, a familiar voice behind him said he wouldn't free someone with uncertain allegiance. Hiro then turned around and saw Vlad standing there. Immediately, Vlad asked him if he wanted help. However, Hiro said he wouldn't drink Maria's blood again, but Vlad warned him not to underestimate him. Confused, Hiro watched as his own arm began to move on its own toward the door. With a burst of power, he managed to force it open. While Hiro stared at his hand, Vlad said even weak vampires had that power, so blood is nothing. Hearing this, Hiro clenched his fist tightly and finally understood what he meant. Thus, he declared that there was no reason they couldn't fight without drinking blood. Later in the Ash District, Hiro joined the battle against the vampires. After that, he quickly checked the hunters nearby, so the girl proceeded to thank him. Hearing this, Hiro was relieved the man's wound was shallow, but when told he was bleeding too, he brushed it off. However, another wave of vampires closed in despite all they'd slain. At the same time, Hiro felt his strength fading due to blood loss even with Vlad's power. Suddenly, the sky above darkened and thunder rolled across the clouds. A flash of lightning then struck the ground behind Hiro. Immediately, he turned towards the lightning. But out of the light emerged a familiar figure, and he found it was Jin. While Jin greeted Hiro and said he had questions, vampires suddenly lunged at him. However, a surge of lightning struck them midair. Due to this, the vampires were paralyzed by the shock. Witnessing this, Hiro was stunned since none of the attacks touched Jin, who deflected them with ease. Jin then turned to Hiro and asked if he had seen Todo and the others, but as he reminded Hiro that he was supposed to be locked up, more vampires charged at Jin, so Jin sighed in irritation. He then drew his sword and muttered that the creatures were too noisy. As he summoned his power, he told them not to interfere. Soon, a massive lightning bolt struck the ground and hit the surrounding vampires. Hiro then quickly raised his arm to shield himself, but as he watched in awe, he thought about how S-class hunters wielded supernatural power. These abilities, known as gifts, were powers of the sun reclaimed through faith and said to grant strength blessed by heaven. Being an S-class, Jin was granted the gift of lightning. When the lightning faded, Hiro was amazed that Jin dodged the attack and took down several vampires in an instant. With that, he realized that this was truly the power of an S-class hunter, and the display sent shivers through his body. But suddenly, Jin called him and asked where his squad was, which left him confused. So Jin explained that he seemed to have lost his way. Soon after, Todo arrived, shouting Jin's name. Immediately, he reported Sato's team was holding the Blue and Ash districts, but no hunters were in Red, and Jin knew that was serious. However, with the vampires still attacking, he thought that he could not leave yet. At that moment, Hiro asked if there was anything he could do. However, Jin noticed the wound on Hiro's body, and it suddenly healed on its own, so he was obviously surprised. Nevertheless, he searched through his pocket and called Hiro's name. He then decided to entrust the Red District to him, which shocked both Hiro and Todo. Still, Jin handed him a marble as a charm. He also said he found it after fighting vampires and thought Hiro might need it. Observing it, Vlad became intrigued, so he urged Hiro to accept it. However, Todo argued sending Hiro alone was reckless and no better than a death sentence. But Jin ignored the warning and simply asked Hiro if he could handle it. In response, Hiro firmly declared that he would go. As he ran off, Todo tried to stop him but failed. Meanwhile, in the Red District, one of the vampires destroyed the area's barrier. The others then cheered and praised Damien for breaking through the defense with ease. With that, Damien said the district held only defenseless civilians, and the vampires grew eager for an easy hunt. As the others celebrated, Damien thought of how humans were ignorant and inferior beings. He then looked at the Ark of Lord Lawrence, a vessel holding a vampire soul that granted immense power. By filling it with human blood, he would receive a reward from Lawrence. However, someone suddenly appeared before him. Damien then turned in confusion. There, he saw a woman standing calmly and demanded to know her identity. Meanwhile, the other vampires learned Damien's army had struck the hunter base by surprise. So they then asked if it was another rogue move by Lawrence's men, but he just laughed in amusement. This prompted the Vampire King to ask what Lawrence was planning. In response, Lawrence calmly told him not to worry and claimed it was all part of his plan. Back on the battlefield, Maria fiercely cuts through the vampires. As a result, nearby vampires wondered how she held such overwhelming strength. Moreover, they were confused since the area was meant to house only civilians. Meanwhile, Maria marveled at the prosthetic arm from the hunter facility that felt natural. So with a swift motion, she sliced through another vampire. The remaining vampires then quickly realized that they were dealing with an A-class hunter. Regardless, Damien clashes with Maria, so Maria was forced to step back from the impact. Still, Damien scolded her for interfering since he'd been told no one was stationed here. Hearing this, Maria quickly understood that he was on a completely different level. After all, most raids had only barons or earls at best, but this one is a marquis. Suddenly, Damien ordered her execution and insisted hunters were just humans, despite their strength. In an instant, his subordinates rushed at Maria. Watching this, Maria scanned the area that has no civilians and no hunters in sight. Knowing that no one was watching, she bit her finger. Soon after, her eyes began to glow and change color. Seeing this, the vampires froze on the spot. Their bodies were unable to move, so they quickly asked if Maria was a vampire due to her appearance. However, Maria swiftly cut through them all with deadly precision. As she moved, she declared coldly that they should not dare to compare her to their kind. After slaying them, she draws blood from herself. After turning it into solidified crystals, she firmly declared that she's a vampire. With a flick of her sword, she launched them toward the remaining vampires and shouted, "Blood bullet." As soon as the bullets hit their targets, the vampires dissolved into ash. Maria then told Damien that awakened hunter blood was toxic like silver to vampires. Moreover, there's poison in her blood, so if they're burned to ash, their souls would vanish. While this happened, Damien realized that he could not move, and quickly recognized that the power restraining him was Medusa's eye. With that, he asked how she used powers only elite vampires possessed, and noted her look and technique matched theirs. However, she remained silent. Damien then noticed an opening. so he quickly raised his sword to strike her, but Maria moved her hand at him and told him not to lump her together with them. Seeing this, Damien's eyes widened at how fast she was, but her hand had already landed on his face. Immediately, pain consumed him as his flesh burned, and he screamed in agony, but Maria just watched without emotion. Soon, his body weakened and he was forced to his knees. Maria swung her sword and slashed his head. As it rolled to the ground, Damien was still in disbelief at what had happened, but Maria ignored him and began to walk away. However, his body refused to die here, so his blood dripped onto the arc, and the moment it touched, his hand began to transform. Furthermore, his head was reattached. Upon sensing the dark aura, Maria turned back, but a large flame burst forth and forced her to retreat. Confusion then filled her as she struggled to grasp what was happening. Meanwhile, Damien felt the surge of power and declared it was the Ark's gift. He could even feel Lawrence's energy flowing through his nerves. Seeing this, Maria was stunned, knowing she had already decapitated him. But before she could move, Damien lunged without warning. Though she blocked his claw, the force cracked her blade. Realizing the danger, she bit herself again. Shen then formed blood bullets and fired toward him. The bullets struck Damien, but his wounds healed instantly. Seeing it, Maria realized that he'd recovered without turning to ash. Ignoring this, Damien called her their failed creation and vowed to take her head himself. He then charged at her, aiming directly for her head. At that moment, Hero appeared and called out to Maria. Startled, she turned toward him, worried that he would see her in her current form. Taking advantage of her distraction, Damien ridiculed her for being too confident. Nevertheless, he drove his claw straight through her chest. Shocked by this, Hero cried out her name in distress. Seeing Hero catch Maria, Damien was surprised to see another hunter appear. He then admitted that Maria has skill, but a weakling had come to help her this time instead. Hearing this, Hero clenched his teeth in frustration. However, his gaze shifted to the corpses that Maria had faced alone. But before he could react, Damien struck again with brutal force. As he moved Maria to safety, Damien sneered that humans always faltered in battle, but since he was already there, he chose to make Hero food for the Ark too. At that moment, Vlad told him that those vampires had used his power. Confused, Hero asked if Vlad meant the Ark. Vlad then said the Ark held pieces of his power, and after his death, vampires tried to claim it but failed, so those fragments became Arks. Gripping his sword, Hero asked if that meant recovering the Arks would amplify Vlad's power. Vlad confirmed it and declared that he must reclaim them immediately. To do so, he would lend Hero all the strength he currently possessed. Meanwhile, Damien laughed mockingly and called Hero an insolent human. He then decided to erase him completely with a flame attack. But Hero watched the attack calmly. When it reached him, he swiftly dodged it with his sword. Seeing this, Damien asked if he was human, but Hero froze as he appeared before him. However, Damien reached out and said resistance was useless against the Ark. He then grabbed Hero's sword, and the blade began to disintegrate into ash. Seeing this, Hero couldn't understand why his Ark's power wasn't enough to stop it. Vlad then said the power had a proper use, and that he would borrow Hero's blood to show it. Without hesitation, Hero sliced his palm, and let his blood fall onto the Ark. Vlad's voice then burned with fury as he vowed to punish Damien for stealing his power. At that moment, the ground beneath the hunter base trembled violently. The hunters nearby looked around in alarm and wondered what was happening. Suddenly, they saw the rank system room activate on its own, though no one was meant to be inside. As they look, they wonder what the magic circle is reacting to. Suddenly, a surge of immense energy erupted, and the system displayed the double S rank. Upon seeing it, they were stunned since Captain-class hunters only ever reached S rank. Thus, they assumed it was a malfunction, but if not, they could only wonder who held such power. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Damien began to doubt Hero, since it was certain that no ordinary human could possibly control an Ark. Furious, he unleashed another wave of flames toward Hero. However, Hero did not move and simply stood waiting. When the fire reached him, he extended his hand and calmly absorbed the flames, leaving Damien stunned. Hero then said the flames sought their true master since Vlad's blood birthed the Ark. Refusing to accept this, Damien insisted that the flames were his and tried to reclaim them. But Hero only smiled and gathered the fire in his palm. After it, he hurled it back at Damien. With a faint smirk, he said that he was merely returning it as requested. Damien then screamed as the flames tore through him, but still convinced the wounds would soon heal. Suddenly, a red mist curled around Hero as he asked if Damien still hadn't grasped what was happening. The moment Damien saw the mist, his expression turned to horror as he recognized what it was. Hero then said he'd regained one of his original powers and would show Damien so he'd remember. Terrified, Damien pleaded for him to stop after realizing whose power it truly was. However, countless swords materialized in the air and pointed directly at him. Trembling, Damien shouted that this was Vlad's blood curse, but Hero just smiled at him. In desperation, he demanded to know who Hero really was. In response, Hero flicked his finger and declared that he was the king of vampires. Immediately, the suspended blades pierced Damien's body due to his Blood Maestro spell. After it, he asked if Damien remembered him now, but Damien could not answer due to the shock. Not long after, he collapsed heavily to the ground. Even so, he marveled at the power and clung to the hope the arc would heal his wounds. He then reached for it desperately, but when he touched it, flames suddenly burst from within him. As his body burned, Damien could only scream in agony. Hero then said the ark was a vessel so no vampire could survive the king's power. Thus, a body unworthy of such power would be consumed entirely by the ark. Gradually, Damien's body disintegrated into ash. Afterward, Hero moved towards it. As he picks the ark, he thinks that he could reclaim another portion of his power from it. But before he could reach out, countless bats suddenly swarmed around him. In an instant, a hand appeared and seized the ark while looking down at Damien's failure. Following it, Hero saw Lawrence lamenting that he'd wanted to push the ark's limits even more. Seeing him, Hero's expression darkened and called Lawrence's name. Hearing this, Lawrence asked mockingly if a mere human had seen him somewhere before. However, Hero did not respond and only stood in shock, so Lawrence used his bats to disappear while saying that he would kill Hero next time since he's busy now. Hearing this, Hero tried to call out and stop him, but then he heard someone groaning behind him. When he turned around, he found Maria already lying in a pool of her own blood. Later at the facility, the doctor said Maria was bleeding heavily, but her self-healing made a transfusion unnecessary. Hearing this, Hero felt relieved, but the doctor warned Maria had lost too much vital energy. Seeing Hero's confusion, the doctor said vital energy fueled Maria's lifespan, and she was drained far beyond her visible wounds. When Hero realized it involved her lifespan, he trembled, but someone suddenly spoke to him. Jin then asked him to report what had happened, and Hero agreed. Jin noted Maria had likely faced a Marcus-level vampire, but even so, her struggle surprised him. Hero agreed but explained that the vampire he encountered had been transformed. Hearing this, Jin asked him to clarify. Hero then revealed the marble he had given him, and explained the vampire was fused with a parasitic arc. After hearing this, Jin confirmed the marble was a vampire artifact, but the man beside him questioned why he trusted Hero with it. Jin simply laughed, but the man warned it wasn't a joke since something serious could have happened. Setting that aside, the man recalled Maria guarding the Red District alone and always leaving corpses, even as a hunter in his squad. Hearing this, Hero remembered his comrade saying Maria had been a hunter, but he wondered why she'd joined the resistance. As he looked at her, he thought of how he wanted to protect humanity and Maria, but her reasons felt different, since it felt like she wasn't protecting people but she was hunting vampires. Thus, he began to wonder if her previous form had something to do with it. However, his thoughts were interrupted when someone grabbed his shoulder. Looking up, he saw the man with an eye patch who asked if they could talk. In response, he agreed. After a while, the man served him a drink, and asked if he could drink tea, so he replied that it should be fine. With that, the man then introduced himself as Hojo, the captain of the 6th squad. He also told Hero not to be afraid and apologized if he'd startled him since he only wanted to talk. Hojo then said Maria had once been in his squad, where her strength and cheerfulness lifted everyone's spirits. So he admitted he didn't know why she quit, but if Maria protected Hero, they couldn't treat him lightly. Hearing this, Hero felt guilty and said Maria had saved him again, but Hojo clarified that wasn't his point. As Hojo calmed him down with tea, Sato secretly hid nearby observing them. He then silently thought this was why vampires could manipulate Hojo so easily. Nevertheless, he grew wary of Hero since Maria had appeared before the attacks, and Hojo seemed to forget their past experience of spies. With that thought, he decided that Hero needed to be eliminated. Meanwhile, Hojo chatted happily with Hero and was excited to share about their hometown's famous seafood. Hero then said his family made tomato seafood soup, which made Hojo eager to suggest it to their chef. Hearing this, Hero had expected Hojo to be intimidating but found him bright and full of warmth. Suddenly, Hojo said his first name was also Hero, which caught him off guard. Hojo then explained that this was partly why he had taken an interest in him. He also admitted he might be too emotionally involved and feared Sato would scold him, but Hero was happy. Hojo then told him that his name Hojo was given to him by Jin along with the title of captain. He also shared that vampire spies burned his village, killing his family and friends before he became a hunter. So he did not mean to sound arrogant by saying he understood his pain, but he hoped to be there for him, and this made Hero listen intently. With that, he urged Hero to grow stronger to protect humanity and prevent more suffering. In response, Hero firmly replied that he would. Later, while lying on his bed, he remembered Hojo apologizing for the cell and promising a proper room the next day. Thinking about it, he felt he should apologize for Hojo's kindness and hoped to talk with him again. However, Vlad asked if it was wise to relax when they still needed arcs to restore their power, to which Hiro said he knew. With that being said, he asked Vlad about Lawrence, and Vlad said he was an extremist. He explained that Lawrence wanted to wipe out humans and forced allies to use the arc, which shocked Hiro. Vlad then reached out and told Hiro not to expect vampires to feel like humans, since even if they looked similar, they were entirely different beings. In response, Hiro agreed and asked Vlad if his only goal was to recover the arcs and seek revenge. Vlad then said if the arc restored his powers, he wouldn't need Maria's blood anymore, which is also Hiro's priority so he could grow stronger without hurting Maria. Vlad then said not stealing blood meant protecting her, and added that drinking it each time was a hassle, and that since they had made a contract, it would be problematic for him if Maria died. Hearing about the contract, Hiro immediately asked what he meant, but Vlad only narrowed his eyes and said they would discuss it later. Before Hiro could answer, a knife flew at him and he barely dodged it. As he fell to the ground, the attacker called him a vampire. With that, Vlad looked displeased at being interrupted, but he also reminded Hiro not to die. At that moment, Hiro finally realized that the person before him was Sato. Immediately, Hiro shouted that he was not a vampire, but Sato ignored him and attacked. Though his strike missed, he hit the wall and knocked a sword to the ground. And despite Hiro's plea for him to stop, Sato charged forward. As a result, he landed a hard slap on Hiro's face, and it sent Hiro crashing to the floor. Sato then grabbed him and said that he didn't know what he's misunderstanding, but he didn't care who Hiro was, and just saw him as something harmful to erase. Hence, he kicked Hiro in the stomach. Watching him struggle, he told him to die quickly if he no longer had the strength to resist. At that moment, Vlad urged Hiro to use his power before he was tortured to death. However, Hiro refused to harm Sato because he was human and not a vampire. Upon hearing this, Vlad asked if he was really in a position to be so leisurely. He then noted that Sato lacked Jin's powers but had solid combat skills and strong resolve. Still, Hiro said using his power might kill Sato, so Vlad asked if he'd rather die. With that, he reminded him that he is weak. As Hiro finally dodged, Vlad said the powerless are never heard and he'd only learn that in death. At the same moment, Hiro saw he was bleeding even though Sato's blade hadn't touched him. He then begged Sato to stop, and insisting that there was no meaning in hunters fighting each other. But Sato forced his head into the ground instead. Due to this, his consciousness began to fade. Coldly, Sato tells him that many of his comrades had said that before they died, so he raised his dagger and told Hiro to say hello to them in the afterlife. Hearing this, Vlad clicked his tongue in frustration. Realizing he couldn't risk losing Hiro's body, he finally chose to take control. Sato was then shocked when Hiro's expression suddenly changed. But when Hiro reached for the fallen sword, Sato managed to stop him. He then pointed his dagger toward Hiro's eye, and demanded to know who he really was. Before Hiro could respond, Hojo arrived, asking what was going on. Seeing Sato, he immediately questioned him. Setting that aside, he ordered the others to call the medical team and tend to Hiro. Sato then quickly tried to excuse himself after Hojo's arrival, but Hojo attempted to stop him. Ignoring him, Sato walked out. He then silently confirmed his suspicion that there was indeed something inside Hiro, but during the fight, Hiro's strike lacked killing intent, and this left him confused. Thinking about it, he recalled Hiro pleading with him to stop since human conflict was meaningless. But this made his veins bulge in anger, since Hiro was saying the same thing like the others. But as he walked, he suddenly staggered. He then recalled how Hiro had nearly counterattacked, and he thought he'd stopped him. Yet he was still wounded, which fueled his will to kill him. Meanwhile, inside, Hojo sincerely apologized to Hiro. He admitted that it was due to his own lack of supervision, and this stunned Hiro. Still, Hojo said he'd talked to Sato, but Hiro asked why since Sato was in Jin's squad. Hojo then revealed that Sato was actually his brother-in-law engaged to his sister Aki. But since it was a long story, he invited Hiro to eat while he explained. Upon seeing the meal, Hiro's attention immediately shifted to the food. While eating, he realized it had been years since he'd tasted meat after only eating vegetables in the Resistance. Hojo then spoke of his sister Aki that had been devoured by vampires and died. Hearing this, Hiro suddenly lost his appetite. Still, Hojo explained that a vampire posing as a hunter infiltrated them, and it was too late when Sato arrived. That's why Sato now targeted anyone suspicious, especially those he thought might be spies. Moreover, killing vampires for him had become a form of atonement. Hiro then apologized for stirring painful memories, but Hojo said their circumstances were what truly deserved an apology. Nevertheless, Sato had already killed real informants, and Hiro realized he'd been attacked the same way. Setting that aside, Hojo shared that Aki was kind, strong, and loved by all. Unexpectedly, someone behind added that Aki was kind, cheerful, and a truly strong hunter. The man then added that Aki often brought what Hojo forgot, but Hojo asked to keep it secret. The girl then introduced herself as Ku, an A-class hunter from Hojo's squad, followed by Mifu, a B-class hunter. In response, Hiro introduced himself in return, and both greeted him warmly. Soon after, Ku asked if he had been with Maria, but the question stunned Hiro. Still, Ku pressed further by asking if Maria really existed, and this confused him more. Ignoring this, Ku and Mifu asked if Maria was strong and how old she was, so he said she was just at the hunter facility. To his surprise, they said Maria's story happened 10 years ago, and she was a legend before they joined. While Hiro was left confused, Maria finally moved, and her eyes slowly opened. On the other hand, Hiro was stunned to learn Maria had been a hunter for over 10 years, but Vlad whispered he'd always suspected Maria wasn't just a normal human. Meanwhile, Ku suggested that Hiro ask Maria himself. At that moment, they finally noticed Maria's arrival. Upon seeing her, Hojo greeted Maria and was glad she was well after collapsing, to which she greeted him back. Upon hearing her name, people nearby wondered if she was really Maria the Madness, but her young face made the rumors doubtful. Ignoring this, Hiro asked if Maria should be moving after her injury, but she said it wasn't a problem. Seeing his worry, she assured him her wounds weren't serious according to the medics. Upon hearing this, Ku and Mifu happily confirmed that Maria was superhuman. Still, Hiro found it strange since her chest had been pierced and the injuries were severe. But suddenly, Maria called out to him. She then told him that she wanted to have a proper talk with him later, which confused him. But she only smiled and reminded him that there were things they needed to discuss, specifically about the two of them, and this left him speechless. Setting that aside, Maria told Hojo she saw the captains heading to the conference room, so he quickly stood up. Remembering the meeting, he quickly left them. Upon arriving at the Hunter Organization's conference room, Hojo apologized for being late due to long talk. Looking around, he saw the 5th Squad Captain Rion, 4th Squad Captain Shino, 3rd Squad Captain Saki, 2nd Squad Captain Hyuga, and 1st Squad Captain Minato. Among them was the acting Captain Todo, who asked why Hojo was leisurely eating lunch. However, Hojo was confused to see Todo at a captain's meeting, but Todo just greeted him casually. Suddenly, someone called Todo's name. It was the 0th Squad Commander Otori, who asked where Jin was since the meeting required all captains to attend. However, Todo said he'd like to know too since Jin had vanished after asking him to lead the meeting. Moving on, Otori informed them that this was a directive from headquarters. He announced that with the expedition teams back, the surprise attack on the vampires would proceed as planned. Thus, they'd strike the Duke's Branch Castle confirmed by scouts, since it links to the main vampire base. With that, he ordered immediate battle prep where Jin would join the advance team with Hojo's squad, and both agreed. Otori then added they'd already sent class hunters and resistance members ahead for their greetings. At that moment, Jin had already arrived at the location. There, he observed as the vampires fought against the hunters and the resistance, but he silently wondered how many humans would die in this so-called greeting. Back at the facility, a loud alarm echoed through the surroundings. Hearing this, Hiro asked if it was the siren and Maria confirmed it. Soon after, the squad captains appeared and this signaled that the battle had begun. Immediately, Hojo ordered his and Jin's teams to form the advance assault group and depart. Hearing this, Mifu and Ku moved feeling disappointed since they were just getting to the good part. Meanwhile, Hyuga told squads 2 to 5 to stay on standby and deploy in order once instructed. At the same time, Todo tells Maria and Hiro they'd fight as temporary members of Jin's squad, so he ordered them to come along. Maria immediately agreed, but Hiro appeared nervous. Noticing this, Ku told him not to worry and assured him he wouldn't be expected to fight directly, and as they set off, she reminded him not to die. Later at the vampire stronghold, Hiro found himself fighting one of the enemies. With swift and precise movements, he managed to defeat it. While he thought that vampires were far stronger than class hunters and resistance members, he was shocked to see that there were too many casualties among the human forces. While fighting, he wondered how long he could last without using the arc or his blood power. Suddenly, blood splattered nearby. When he looked, he saw that Maria had been hit. Alarmed, he quickly asked if she was alright, but she only replied by questioning why she wouldn't be. Hearing this, Hiro realized that she did not seem to care even when she was injured. Watching her fight recklessly, he could not help but think that her style was self-sacrificing. Meanwhile, Todo figured Jin had secretly joined the advance team and started wondering where he'd gone. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Lawrence was lounging casually on the couch. He could hear the commotion outside, but he trusted the castle guards to handle it. However, his eyes suddenly narrowed as he sensed something unusual. With that, he turned to the nearby window. There, he spotted a hunter standing all alone. At the same time, Jin noticed someone emerging from the castle. Upon looking, he found Lawrence approaching. Immediately, Lawrence asked how Jin got into the castle. He even asked if he came alone to challenge him, but he finally looked below and saw the chaos. He then summoned energy into his hand and said Jin seemed content to watch his comrades die without helping. Knowing this, he demanded to know which side Jin was truly on. Jin then calmly stated that he had no intention of fighting and that he was only observing. However, Lawrence said that he had no patience for such words, so he immediately attacked, but Jin effortlessly deflected the strike. Seeing this, Lawrence was surprised as he realized that Jin was one of the S-class types. Ignoring his remark, Jin drew his sword. He then repeated that he had no intention of engaging in battle. After it, lightning struck his position. Upon hearing this, Todo and the others quickly looked up. Immediately, Todo recognized the lightning as Jin's and wondered why he hadn't shown up on the battlefield, but by then Jin had already vanished from his spot. Seeing this, Lawrence assumed Jin had escaped, yet seeing the aftermath of the lightning, he marveled at Jin's strength and wondered why he only watched. At the same time, Todo kept fighting, the vampires feeling frustrated that Jin still hadn't shown up to help. Suddenly, someone warned him to stay focused, but the vampire was already upon him. Just as the vampire was about to strike, someone appeared and enveloped his sword with water. After it, he drowned the creature in a sphere of liquid, while telling Todo to stop giving middle-aged men like him a scare. Upon looking, he realized it was Hojo and expressed his gratitude for the save. In addition, he quickly asked for his assistance. Hojo then replied that fighting like this would only waste their zeal, so they needed to break through to the castle. And once an opening appeared, both his squad and Jin's squad would break through together. Understanding this, Todo drew his sword to show the enemies why their squads are working together. With that, Hojo gathered water around his blade and called out for them to finish this quickly. Soon, their combined powers merged and Hojo's water fused with Todo's lightning. Without hesitation, Todo unleashed the attack while shouting the name Aqua Break. Immediately, the combined strike electrocuted the surrounding vampires. Witnessing this, Ku was impressed while Mifu admired the precision and power of Hojo's water technique. Ku then said water and lightning worked perfectly together, while Mifu joked his power was just a mere static shock. Hearing this, Todo could only laugh at the comment. However, Mifu was told to stay quiet since Jin's squad was worn out, but Ku said Todo was just A-class, so Hojo scolded her too. Setting that aside, Mifu noticed the vampires following them and felt annoyed. Todo then said they'd hold the entrance while Hojo and Maria went in, to which Hojo agreed. After they left, Sato asked if it was safe to let them go, while Yuki added Maria was still supposed to be recovering. In response, Todo said he was told to watch them but not protect them. Hearing this, Sato and Yuki were confused and saw that Todo was like Jin, who was hard to read. Meanwhile, Hojo's group continued moving forward. When they arrived at a fork in the path, Ku quickly asked Hojo what they should do. Maria then suggested going right with Hiro, and Hojo agreed, so he chose the middle path for himself. With that, Ku and Mifu were assigned to take the left. As Maria and Hiro went their way, Maria's motives became increasingly clear. She eventually admitted that she could not forgive herself for having vampire blood. Her wounds healed instantly, and centuries of life left her feeling like a monster no one could trust. With a firm voice, she declared that she hated vampires more than anyone. Hearing this, Hiro could only call her name in concern. Still, he reminded her that fast healing didn't erase the pain. Maria was caught off guard by his words, but she quickly composed herself. Hiro then said fast healing didn't stop the pain, and warned she could die if she kept fighting recklessly, but she simply replied that it was fine with her. Immediately after, she sliced down a vampire lurking behind him. Now transformed, she remarked that it might be his turn to share a secret. But upon seeing more vampires approaching, she decided to postpone it until they cleared the path. Meanwhile, Hojo continued forward, but he stopped when he noticed a door ahead and realized that this path was the quickest, so he proceeded through the door, while silently hoping the others were safe. However, he was halted when a voice called out saying he was late. Standing before him was Lawrence, who expressed his delight at finally having something entertaining to deal with. But Hojo's expression turned to shock as he recognized Lawrence as the man from before. Hearing this, Lawrence looked directly back at him. Years ago, Hojo worriedly told Aki that she was too kind to everyone, but Aki only replied that he was one to talk. Nevertheless, he scolded her for helping a stray resistance member when he thought she'd already left the squad. She then explained it was just a bruise, but he warned her again about acting alone. Still, she countered that Hojo would have done the same thing. She added that Hojo always helped without hesitation, and she just wanted to be like him. Hearing this, Hojo could only sigh helplessly. Suddenly, someone snatched her strawberry and teased her as Little Miss Perfect. When she turned around, she was surprised to see Sato eating her dessert. Sato then said he knew she was foolishly saving it for Hojo, but she insisted that she just wanted the strawberry. She then reported Sato to Hojo, but he said he'd be nice to his future brother-in-law. Unexpectedly, someone arrived looking for Aki. She then found it was Ron, and Ron reminded her she'd promised to watch his training that afternoon. Immediately, Hojo realized Ron was the one Tsubaki had helped, and Aki praised his combat instincts after he thanked her. But Hojo remained silent while Sato whispered that there was something off about Ron. He then added that he gave off a strange smell, and Hojo quietly agreed. Thus, Hojo said they'd help with training, and Aki cheerfully replied they were both kind. Later, while fighting vampires, Ku called out to Hojo. She then asked if he'd heard about class hunters disappearing, but Hojo looked confused. So as they fought, Ku said hunters vanished before deployment, and Hojo asked if a disguised vampire was behind it, but she thought weak vampires were behind it. Before long, they reminded Aki to be careful, and this puzzled her, so they explained she was too kind and didn't want her offering blood to vampires so easily. Aki then shouted that she would never do that, but vampires suddenly appeared behind her, so she swiftly attacked them with her great sword. Afterward, she declared that even she could not tolerate vampires. Impressed, Mifu and Ku praised her strength while Hojo noted her progress, but she just told them to hurry. Later at the facility, Hojo and the others started planning to make soup when someone called out to Aki. Seeing her approach, Ron congratulated her, and she asked about his squad, so he said a siren went off, and they left for another mission. Due to this, he was told to stay in patrol, but found several collapsed class hunters. Understanding the urgency, she planned to call back her squad and asked Ron to lead her to the scene. So without hesitation, Ron led her there. At the same time, Hojo noticed the alarm ringing throughout the facility. Feeling uneasy, he immediately went to look for Aki. Meanwhile, Sato said the daily sirens were starting to seem suspicious. Hearing this, Yuki asked if staying behind was okay, but Sato said it was fine since something was clearly happening. However, he suddenly stopped when he caught a strange scent. Looking ahead, they saw Hojo standing motionless near a door. Sato then asked him what was wrong. However, a faint voice came from inside, calling Hojo brother. There, they saw Aki's body being devoured by vampires. Despite her condition, she managed to whisper weakly for them to burn the captain. As a result, both Hojo and Sato froze in shock. At that moment, Ron began saying that Aki had truly been a good human, so good that she was convenient for them. He also mocked her for coming without backup, but admitted he was impressed she killed 50 vampires in the dark. While Hojo was still in shock, Ron's form began to shift. He then perfectly mimicked Hojo's appearance and revealed that he was skilled at transformation. So Aki froze when he imitated her brother's face, and this made Hojo's expression darkened with fury. Without hesitation, he attacked the surrounding vampires. At the same time, Ron was caught in the assault. Immediately, he grabbed Ron by his collar, but Ron transformed into Aki and pleaded softly for him to stop. Seeing this, Hojo faltered. In that instant, Ron extended his hand and called Hojo truly foolish. Using his sharp nails, he plunged into Hojo's eye, and blood splattered across the floor. Seeing this, Sato immediately intervened, calling Ron a scumbag, while Yuki rushed to help Hojo. Ignoring them, Ron took Hojo's eyeball and placed it in his mouth. After chewing it, he commented that the taste was indeed different. With that, he said that his hunger was satisfied, and that the effort had been entertaining, though he found Aki's taste disappointing, which enraged Hojo more. Ignoring this, Ron summoned his bats, and said he'd eat Hojo next time they met. Back in the present, Hojo now faced Ron once again. Lawrence then ordered him to watch his tongue and asked if they had met before. Hojo then saw Lawrence didn't remember, and said coldly he never expected anything from vampires. With that, he attacked him by sending a surge of water. Due to the impact, Lawrence panicked as the water coiled around him. Watching him struggle, Hojo said all life needs water but vampires fear it. With that, he vowed to kill Lawrence slowly by drowning him in despair.